Okay, we are in the second portion of our webinar, and what we are going to do now is have a case study example regarding a student that, a fictional student that Stephanie Carmicheal works with. So I am going to turn that over to Stephanie. If everyone else on the panelists could turn their mics and their videos off, that would be good. Stephanie, it's all yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. Give me just a second, and I'm going to share. I have a little PowerPoint to go along here. There we go. So I'm going to be talking about a student who has very high anxiety that I work with. And I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I am a teacher of the visually impaired and an orientation mobility specialist here in the great state of Vermont. I work with infants through 21-year-olds. And so the student that I am talking about today, I began working with her a few years ago. I started out just as her teacher of the visually impaired. And then after I became an O&M instructor, I also took on that role with her as well. And so I want to give you a little bit of the background about who the student is and our history working together and how that kind of brought me to using this program and how we've used it together. So the student is a high school age transition student. She is legally blind. She has septo-optic dysplasia, esotropia, nystagmus, poor depth perception. She's below grade level in all academic areas, and she has high anxiety, and she is a selective mute. Her parents have shared that she talks freely at home, but in the 3 years that I have spent working with her, she has never said a single word to me, and she does not speak at school currently. I should also mention that she does have a cane, but she does not use it. So a little bit of our background. When we first started working together, I was brand new to her. She was brand new to me. And throughout the year, about the most expressive communication that I received from her was maybe a slight twinge in one corner of her mouth that indicated a positive response. And so we had a really difficult time working together, but we did what we could through that first year, with me just serving as her teacher, the visually impaired. And in that first year too, her orientation mobility specialist at the time, who had been working with her for a number of years, the two of us would take her out into the community, mainly to the local animal shelter, which was a place that she really, really enjoyed. You could see her affect just completely change. She was really happy in that location. And we were even able to take her to places like the grocery store, which were not quite as fun. So that brings me then to our second year together when I started working as her orientation mobility specialist. I had monthly visits scheduled with her, and so I was like, all right, we got her out into the community last year, gonna do it again this year. And so every month I'd show up and say, all right, we're gonna go to the pet shelter. And every month she would sit there and not leave the school. One time I got her outside the school building, but then she wouldn't walk down the stairs to get in my car. And I kept trying to be like, well, this was something that she really enjoyed, and I know that she loves this activity. So, you know, what's the issue here, and how can we work on orientation mobility? She gets around the school just fine. It's really the out in the community that she needs the work, and so I was really kind of racking my brain about what to do. And so we pressed on through the year, and every month it was the same thing over and over again. And I should mention though that during that second year, her and I's relationship really moved to the next level. She was a lot more expressively communicative with me. She was smiling, laughing. She'd even write messages on her phone to share with me. So she was communicating a lot more with me. So we really started to have a little bit more of that core relationship built. And that brings me to our most current year. I tried again. I thought, okay, well, we really built that relationship last year. So maybe now she'll trust me enough that she'll come with me out into the community. And I tried that a couple times, and it was a repetition of last year. And so I said to myself, I was like, I really don't want to get back into this this format of me showing up and her not leaving. So I was like, how can I work on something with her outside from the inside? And I was trying to really think outside the box. And I remembered that my supervisor had mentioned this new product that had come out from APH about something on the computer with O&M. So I walked down the hall to her office and I said, can you please tell me a little bit more about this? And she handed me the thumb drive, and I plugged it into my computer and started flipping through the program. And I was like, you know what, this might be the thing that I can do with her. And so my hope was that by going through the program and giving her a little bit more of an understanding of what a situation of confidence or uncertainty is, that then she might be more willing to go out into the community, and it might alleviate some of that stress and anxiety that she was feeling with leaving the school. And hopefully then we would be able to tackle some streets like this, which is very similar to one in her fairly rural Vermont town. In the foreground, you see that there is a crosswalk, and towards the back there is the road curves to the left, and there's also a side road that goes down a hill to the right. And just behind the point of view of this image is a four-way intersection. So these are the kind of street crossings that she encounters daily in her town. So I was hoping that, you know, we would be able to at least get out and look at these kinds of intersections by the springtime and see and talk even more about what the confidence and uncertainty, what those look like. So in November, we began working on the program together, and she really seemed to enjoy it right from the start. She's really comfortable on the computer, and it was just the two of us working side by side in a quiet room. And so in the first couple lessons, which are really more text-based, I was reading through the information to her, and then we'd kind of pause along the way and discuss it a little bit more in depth, and I would be able to give her information that was specific to her community using the information from the program. And when there were the little quizzes at the end to gauge understanding, I'd give her those options, and she would respond in some way to let me know which answer she wanted to select. And she was able to get all of the quiz questions correct, which really let me know that she was understanding the information. So knowing that there was that understanding, then we could kind of build on it using the program and eventually moving out into the community. And so we continued moving through the program on a monthly basis. I'd go to her school, we'd sit down, go through the program. And then our last face-to-face meeting was in February, just before the outbreak of COVID-19 here in the US. So that kind of put the halt to our lessons for the time being. But my hope is that when we get back to school, that we'll be able to continue with this program, and it will alleviate some of that stress and anxiety for her. But I also want to share one more key story about her that I think really demonstrates her anxiety. During our last February visit together, we had just gotten to the interactive portion of the program where she's learning her intuitive crossing time. And so in the program, it asks you to put in the time and press the space bar when you start and you're at the end of the street. And super simple task. I explained it to her. She indicated to me that she understood what the task was. And so I was like, all right, here we go. I started it up and her hands just remained in her lap. And I was like, all right, let's try it again. And her hands still remained in her lap. And so after a couple of times of that, I had to physically, with her permission, of course, move her hand up onto the keyboard of the computer. I was like, okay, now she's got a finger on the space bar. We'll get it this time. And so we played the program again, and she still didn't press the space bar. So I was like, okay, we'll take it a little step further back. I'll put my hand next to hers on the space bar, and I'll press the button a couple times so that she understands exactly what's going to happen when she presses that space bar. After a couple times of me doing it, then I said, okay, I'm going to leave my hand right here next to yours, but you are going to press the space bar. And just like that, she did it. And we were able to go through a few of the trials together before our time ran out for the day. And so it was after that experience that I was really just remembered how high her anxiety is and how many steps there are to get from the computer to the real world. And so it was really just that reminder and that eye-opening experience for me that this really does affect her quite a bit. And so it became more clear to me that this program was really going to be important for her to have that kind of peace of mind of before going out into the community, knowing that there are these situations, but knowing how to deal with them and how to determine what's a situation of confidence and what's a situation of uncertainty. And so I'll just leave you with this one word of confidence. There's situations of confidence in the street crossings, but before a student can tackle those, they need to have confidence in themselves and their skills and in you as their instructor. And so I'm just going to close this. And
this is Amy. I just wanted to say I'm helping moderate. Stephanie, thank you for that beautiful example of your student. We know that feelings of anxiety, it sounds like she has a fairly significant level of anxiety, but that anxiety is a part of what all orientation and mobility specialists who support clients and students witness and experience and feel concurrently with their students and clients for a variety of reasons. And we know that that anxiety is for good reason. So this program is really important for building that confidence, as you say, the trusting relationship that you have with her. I think this is extremely important for students to build their confidence. We did have a couple of questions in the chat pod that we can take before we transition back to Donna, who is going to demonstrate the program's use at a distance with an adult client. people are talking a lot these days about the role of parents at home during the pandemic, that many parents and family members and grandparents and aunts and uncles even are supporting students at home. And what would you say would the role of her parents? Could you speak a little bit of maybe about your relationship with parents? And then some folks have asked even if your district would allow you to continue to serve her during the pandemic and continue maybe working on this program.
So for this particular student, in regards to her parents, they are involved on some level. They're not overly involved, but they don't completely separate themselves from the situation. But they, knowing that her anxiety is so high, they don't typically force her to go out. If she'll have her coat on and not leave the house. And so there's that piece of actually getting out into the community that doesn't happen quite a bit from the home perspective. And in regards to continuing the program, I'm in a unique situation where I have the program on my computer. She does not have it on her computer at home. So I can't run through the simulation activities with her. We've been able to kind of continue going through the information piece of it that I've shared with her, and we've had some dialogue back and forth in that regard. But the actual simulations we haven't been able to do from a distance because of that situation of her not having the program on her computer at home.
Sure, Stephanie. And do you think that there are a couple of questions in the chat pod? Julie asked, does she get counseling at school for her anxiety? And then I had a question about the parents themselves. I wonder if this program would actually be helpful in building the confidence of parents who can be very, rightfully so, but sometimes more than they need to be, protective, overly protective of students.
Yeah, that's a great idea that I hadn't even thought of, but I think it certainly could be, the program helping to build confidence for parents as well. And so that they really, because I think too, a lot of times the parents of our students don't necessarily understand what it's like for our students and for our clients. So for them to be exposed to that same learning and understanding could definitely be helpful. And I think these parents in particular would be open to it. And question about counseling, I believe right now she's receiving outside counseling. I don't believe it's through the school, but she is.
Well, Stephanie, thank you very much for these thoughts, and we hope that it will provoke some thinking from the attendees today about maybe some creative ways to work with students at a distance, maybe with support from parents, or maybe even as a parent educational activity as well. But thank you for building a trusting relationship with your student and for your time. Stephanie volunteered to present today, so she is not receiving compensation for her time, nor is Donna, for that matter. It's a labor of love. All right, well, I'm going to turn it back over now to, we will continue with some questions at the end and more discussion on distance consultation. So Stephanie, thank you again. And if you would like to transition and turn your video over to Donna and to Jeremy, and I will let Donna introduce her guest.
Great. All right. Stephanie, that was so moving. I thank you so much for sharing that. you know, I hadn't thought about that, this being such an important part of a potential use of it, but I can see, and maybe Jeremy can speak to this as being a recipient of the training remotely, as to how you can provide some of the skills without putting them into situations where they're anxious enough at least to press the button. You know? So thank you so much. Let me share my screen and introduce Jeremy. All right. So it is my great pleasure to introduce what I'm going to be calling a pioneer, Jeremy. And Jeremy, I don't know, is it Serafati? Do we have, can we unmute Jeremy?
Sorry about that. I was getting the mute button. It's Sefarati.
Sefarati. Thank you. Okay, great.
And Jeremy,
Well,
this is Amy. We're having a little trouble hearing you. You look very dapper, by the way, for the presentation with your backdrop. But if you could, yes, can we test
any
yourself?
better?
That is
Yeah.
better. Thank you, Jeremy.
Excellent. Okay.
Great.
And I will do this.
Well, I had mentioned that we were trying to put this together and trying to figure out, could this be done remotely? And, you know, maybe we could have somebody in, you know, Australia try to hook up, and how are we going to do this? And Jeremy happened to contact me for some training. So really, you know, I'm starting to believe in miracles, Jeremy, because truly putting you in my life and in the life of the profession at this time was a godsend. And so I'm going to ask Jeremy, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we can take it from there. Let me stop sharing and so we can get Jeremy.
Thank you, Donna.
On. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I need to excuse myself for 1 second here. I have 3 children doing schoolwork right now in my bedroom. So let me tell you about myself. I'm a director of operations at a local church. I'm a father of 4, a husband, and I have a congenital
Jeremy, this is Amy. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. We are having trouble hearing you still.
Let me change my mic.
It's actually better when your mouth is closer to your mic. It's sounding better. Yes, perfect.
Okay, excellent. Let me start over then. My name is Jeremy Sefarati. I am a director of operations at a local church. I work full-time about 2 miles from my house. Do most of my transit to and from in good weather on foot using a white cane. I'm a father of 4 kids between 4 and 8 years old, and a husband of one very special wife. Special not because she's married to me, but special because of who she was before she was married to me. I have congenital vision loss that has taken all the sight in my right eye and has left me with about 125 in my left eye with less than 20 degrees of visual field in that eye. I would describe myself as a progressive when it comes to my vision. I have progressive vision loss. Most impact was done about 5 years ago, 8 years ago now actually, when I suffered another retinal detachment due to glaucoma and an anterior vitrectomy that was done years before that. Took away a good bit of central vision. I am facing progressively increasing challenges in my mobility and my ability to take care of my family and move them around, take the kids out to the park, out for walks to downtown Annapolis. Some of our favorite things to do has become increasingly more difficult. And then progressive also in my acceptance of and working in my visual loss. I didn't start using my white cane regularly until about a year ago. And that was after a couple, not terribly close calls, but close enough that a close call doesn't have to be within 20 feet. It's just got to be close enough for me to say, you know, insurance policy might come in handy at this point, and I don't really want to use it. So I reached out to Dona because what I was looking for was to have Give me a second, let me switch slides here. I can do this without. Here we go.
Jeremy, you need to share your screen.
It's really just for my notes, so I don't get
Oh,
lost.
okay, great.
But thank you for that. So I was looking for 3 things. I was looking to have any blind spots picked up and identified for me, because I've been using my vision for almost 40 years as best as I can, and I consider what I do to be normal. I forget that it's not what everybody experiences, especially within my family. I was looking to increase my ability to travel safely by myself and with my kids, and I was looking to see if I could increase my confidence in navigating both what I am traversing now and in the future, both with expected visual loss and with growing family and personal needs. So I reached out to Donna, and like she said, and I think I reached out to her Friday of last week, and she was in the middle of writing an email back to me. And my purpose in writing to her at that time was to say, hey, I know that we can't get together, but I just want to get my foot in the door. And as it happens, my foot got in the door, and the rest of me was able to follow pretty quickly due to this program. So I'll talk more about that in a little while. But I think, Donna, I turn it back to you at this point.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Great, let me share so we can look at my PowerPoint. And I wanted, Jeremy shared, is going to share his perception of it as a student. And I'll just share with you the perspective of me as an instructor. I was terrified to, I threw out on the listserv this little message saying, maybe this program could be used remotely, but I didn't have the remotest idea of how it actually could be done. And then when Amy took me seriously and said, well, let's put a webinar together, I'm thinking, well, now you gotta put some thought into this. And so I Googled, how do you, we couldn't figure, it was not going to be possible to have the student download the program. That's what I first thought. And so I thought, well, so how can we do it? And then I remembered that when my computer's on the blink, people come in and control my computer. So I thought, well, maybe I could have the student come in and use the program from my computer. So I Googled how to do that. And that's when Jeremy came in. So, I felt like I'm the instructor and I should know what I'm doing. And so, I'm assuming I'm with a student who doesn't know how to use a computer. And so I need to do all the work. And so I said, well, we're going to be using this program, and you just click on this and click on that and we can do it. And he clicked on this and clicked on that. And I could hear over the phone, this will not work on a Mac. So I was totally befuddled. And I said, well, I'll call you later after I figure it out. And thank goodness I called him back, and it turns out he's very familiar with this program called TeamViewer. And so he, helped me download what I need to download. I don't think I even had to download. I forget how it worked, but he got me through it. And I just thought it was so awesome that here's this guy that's going to help us pioneer this program, and he's the one actually providing the technical assistance to do it. It just seems so fitting. And I will say that as we had our first session Monday, and as I prepared for it, I was scared out of my wits. I didn't know how this was going to work. And so I put down everything that I thought we could teach remotely. So I had my little curriculum that helped a lot. And then I went into the program to find out where I could pull out the modules that I needed. And once we got settled down, and I have a picture here showing me sitting at the computer. I've got Jeremy on Face Chat. What is it called? FaceTime? I don't know what you call it, but I can see him in my phone. And on the computer screen is a picture actually of his crossing, and he is seeing the same thing on his computer, and he has actually actually able to come into my computer, and when he presses his space bar, it presses the space bar on, you know, in the computer for on my computer. So after about 20 minutes, Jeremy, I started feeling so comfortable and loving it. You know, many years ago, I stopped teaching in order to have a family. And at the end, you know, after a couple years, I was going to go back, and I was, again, terrified. And I thought, well, I need to have a refresher up. I need to refresh my skills. How am I going to teach after being away for so long? And I remember the specific place. I was standing kind of under a little bridge and was with my client and thinking, oh, I got this. This is just like it was before. I'm still good. I can still do it.
Like riding a bike.
And I still had that same feeling when I was working with Jeremy. After about 20 minutes, I looked at myself and I thought, oh my gosh, I got this. This actually felt to me just like I was teaching him in person. I had the same kind of feeling, the same feeling of control, the same feeling of being able to, you know, we had discussions, we worked through everything. For me, it was a very positive experience. And so I may be doing a lot more remote, even when the coronavirus is over. I may be doing it just because it really is cool. So what did we use for the remote street crossing instruction? And I will say that this can be done without all of these things, but this really made it rock. We had the APH program that we've been talking about. We had internet. We had what Jeremy found, the team viewer. It's actually free. The one I had found was going to cost $44 a month. And like I said, it couldn't work with Macs. So his team viewer worked fine. We had FaceTime on the phone. I had my checklists and my notes. And I had gone actually to his intersection and got some videos and some pictures of his situation so that we could be discussing them over the phone, over the internet. So here's my curriculum for teaching remote instruction to Jeremy. First of all, I wanted to have a discussion about what the heck are situations of uncertainty and what kind of things should you be looking for and what's this all about. Then we had him develop his intuitive understanding of crossing time, which we've done with you folks. Got your foot in the water on that one. And then I wanted him to learn how to compare the warning time of approaching vehicles with his crossing time. Then I wanted him to put all that together and identify situations of uncertainty. And then I wanted him to be able to analyze the risk of crossing when he's in a situation of uncertainty, analyze the risk of his situation, and including a situation of a video from his street. And I emphasized to him, this is hypothetical because the situation may be very different when we're actually there, but I was using it as a hypothetical, a real life hypothetical that he could use for practice to analyze the risk of crossing, and then identify alternatives if the risk is unacceptable. So that was my plan. So we're gonna look at videos actually of the training, and the first one we're going to start with is developing his understanding of intuitive understanding of his crossing time. The materials I used for this was a phone connection, a stopwatch, and a picture of his crossing that we posted on the shared screen. So we're going to see a video of the instruction. I'm trying to think if I need to set you up. I've got my cell phone used as the stopwatch, and we're looking at the picture of his crosswalk. So let's see.
And Donna, you are at your own home, and he is at his own phone?
I'm sorry.
Where is everyone located? You are at your home, and he is at his home.
Yes, thank you, Amy. I'm at home with my stopwatch and a phone connected with Jeremy. On my computer is a picture of his crosswalk, and he has, through Team Viewer, has the same thing on his computer. So
but he's at home.
He's in Annapolis at home. I'm in my home.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, he is not with me at all. I am all by myself with my husband.
And how did he know how long it takes him to cross a street?
Well, he actually, thank you. I was going to say, in preparation, I went and measured the crosswalk because I wasn't sure he was going to feel safe crossing it to get his timing. Turns out he was, so I didn't need to do that. But I found an alternative place where he could time his crossing if he didn't want to cross there. And so actually, while I was there, Fred and I locked ourselves out of my car. So I ended up having to wait for somebody to come and bring me a key. And while I was waiting, Jeremy came to time the crossing. He was going to do it with his wife. And while I was there, I actually timed his crossing. So that's how we got his crossing. Thank you, Amy. I'm glad you brought that up. But it could have been done remotely by having somebody, or he could have done it himself, time his own crossing there. But I was able to do it myself. Okay, ready to go?
Ready.
All right, here we go.
Standing right at the street, so you can imagine that crossing. So
Let me back it up again.
Actually, I like to do this when you're standing right at the street, so you can imagine facing that crossing. So I don't know if this helps you imagine that you're standing there ready to cross. But I'd like to, what I'm going to do is give you a little demonstration, and then I'm going to ask you to try it when you're ready. I'm going to imagine, if you can imagine starting to cross, if you started now,
I'm starting my
you'd be
stopwatch.
walking toward the middle, you'd reach the middle now, you'd still be walking, you'd reach the other side now.
I'm doing that by, I started the timer. When it came to 4 seconds, I said you'd be in the middle. When it came to 9 seconds, I said you'd be on the other side.
Does that jive with what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, it always seems like it's going to be faster in my mind until I'm in there. And,
So-
seconds ticking away.
Yeah, so you thought you would have been there earlier, and I'm still going on, you're still walking, huh? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Most people do. Most people way underestimate how long it takes to walk. And so if you'd like, I'll give you another demonstration, or you can try it yourself. You want to try it yourself, or you want me to give another
I'll
demonstration? Okay. Now, when you're doing this, I want you to be very careful not to be counting, because that will teach you nothing. So yes, imagine whether you have your eyes closed and you're actually picturing yourself out there, or whether you're looking at this and kind of seeing yourself cross. Either way, tell me when you reach the middle, or tell me when you start, when you reach the middle, when you reach the other side.
And I'm starting.
I just pushed the stopwatch.
I'm in the middle. I'm at the other side.
Wow. Okay. You took 4 seconds to reach the middle, but in this one you said you were in the middle in 3 seconds. You needed 9 seconds to cross, and you said I'm there when it was about 7 seconds. Do you want to try it again, or do you want me to give you a demonstration? Yes. Jeremy, don't feel bad.
My tail's still in the breeze.
That's right.
I thought that car felt close. Starting. Middle. End.
Perfect. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Did it feel like you were trying to overload it, or did it feel right?
No, I was specifically not in my head. I was just walking and looking at the street and feeling it.
Oh, Jeremy, that's beautiful. And when you did that, you nailed it. That's awesome. All right.
It was very helpful to look at the street and picture that first, and then close my eyes as I was walking.
Oh, so you're looking at the picture on the screen. Close your eyes, and then off you go, and you picture yourself, the wind in your hair, and awesome.
All right. So that was with the, I did not use the APH program for that. And there was actually some very good interaction that went on because I've done this for 30 years and I've always done it using my stopwatch. So you know, if you're not familiar with it, it might be helpful to use the APH program to teach that part of it. But if you're comfortable with it, you can just, you know, use a stopwatch and do it yourself with the person. And that allows more interaction and than it was with the program. So now I wanted him to learn to compare his crossing time with the warning time of approaching vehicles, and to be able to then put that together to recognize situations of uncertainty. The materials for that included, again, the team viewer and internet. The team viewer allowed him from his computer to press the key, and it worked on my computer. Now, the only problem is that by listening it over the phone and also trying it with my husband's computer next to me, I realized that when he gets the cue or the sounds or the video or whatever, it's about half a second later. So I worried that when he presses the button, it's going to be a half a second. When he first hears something, it's actually going to be a half a second after he would have heard it if he had been on my computer. So I wanted to calibrate. APH program has a wonderful feature where you have to push the button, and boy, with Stephanie's student, this would have been great, because you know, if there's a time lag and it's consistent, it actually takes that in consideration. And so when you hit the button, it assumes, oh, she actually heard it 2 seconds earlier. It just takes 2 seconds to push the button. So I went through that feature to calibrate so that when the computer gave him feedback, it would be on an accurate thing. I actually, because I wasn't sure that the computer actually would calibrate for a half a second, I actually added a second to his crossing time. So the computer thinks it takes him 10 seconds to cross to the other side rather than 9. And I did that because I wanted to be on the safe side. I didn't want him to think that he was getting feedback based on actually a shorter time, because it takes him half a second to hear what he would have heard from the original computer. So I used a module 5 to calibrate the button. I used module A7, which has some exercises of listening to approaching vehicles and having him press the button when he thinks he hears something coming, and then compare that warning time of hearing that with his crossing time. And then module A8, which is, once he gets good at that, he listens to about a half a dozen approaches, and then he has to kind of figure out what is the range of warning times, and is that in a situation of uncertainty or not. So we had the APH program with all those modules, the internet with the team viewer, and then the phone connection. And actually what I wanted to do is be able to observe him press the key. Now, he could have said, "I'm pressing," just like Laura did, or wave his hand or something, and that would have worked too. But what I had him do was put the FaceTime phone down so that I could see him on the key. So let's see how that goes. Again, I've got it set up, and I'm looking at his hands on the keyboard, and I've got on my screen is the APH program. And so he's now in the part where he's going to listen to an approaching vehicle, press the space bar when he thinks he hears something coming, and then he has to report, was that longer than, shorter than, or about the same as my crossing time, the warning time. Whoops.
Okay, now that you have an intuitive understanding of the passage of time that you need to reach the middle and finish crossing a given street, let us see if you can figure out if you have enough warning time for approaching vehicles at that street. So here is what I want you to do. While we play a recording, you listen for approaching vehicles, and press this space bar the instant that you think there is something that might be a vehicle coming. Do not wait to be sure whether it is a vehicle or not. We want to know the very moment that you first detected even a hint of an approaching vehicle.
Jeremy is asked to indicate whether the warning time was longer than, shorter than, or about the same as his crossing time.
You are correct. You made a good estimate. As you indicated, Your warning time for this vehicle is longer than your crossing time for the first half of the street. This is the 12th time that you have decided correctly that your warning time was longer, about the same as, or shorter than your crossing time. Congratulations.
Well, way to go.
Thank you.
I echo her in congratulations. You didn't get a single one wrong. Was it hard?
I was estimating based on the sound itself, and
Oh, really?
I guess the best way to say it is imagining in my mind how far down the street that vehicle is based on its sound.
Okay. So you weren't kind of picturing yourself crossing and, ooh, gosh, he got there before I finished.
Towards the end, I was.
Yeah.
It was more helpful with crossing both lanes of traffic than the first lane. The first lane was easy. The first lane was like,
yeah, you can tell that was.
I have 5 heartbeats. I've got to cross whatever. But
yeah.
crossing both lanes, I guess crossing both lanes, by the time the car crossed my plane, perpendicular to me,
Yes.
I just knew.
Oh,
I
God.
had a sense. This was long enough, and this was not long enough. Based on
Wow. In your gut, then it just thought, oh, or yeah, I'm good.
Yep. No, that was perfectly safe. I time to spare on that one. Absolutely.
It sounds like you have this kind of an internal gut where in the beginning you were thinking, you were concentrating, you were thinking about what color was the car and was he texting and whatever. And after a while it was like, oh, no, it's good, or it's, no, that's
That was actually, once I got comfortable, once the gut kicked in, I was just picturing the vehicle as it passed. I was listening to it, and then when it passed, I just saw whatever vehicle my mind had put there making that noise.
And you felt in your gut.
I saw something pass in front of me, felt the breeze coming by,
and I guess
kind of muscle memory.
Muscle memory.
I have to say that I have never had I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never had anybody really develop that muscle memory, that gut feeling. It was always a struggle, and it was probably because I just didn't do it long enough. We had to move on to other things. But you doing this on the program allowed that, and so I'm just really a proponent of this. Instead of, yes, you have to do it out on the real street. I mean, there's just no substitute for that. But there's also no substitute for having this practice one after another, and getting that gut feeling. So that can be do it. And we're getting short on time, so I want to just do this other one real quick. That was Monday's lesson. Tuesday's lesson, we analyzed the risks of crossing in situations of uncertainty. And the materials were, again, our phone connection, our team viewer, and our internet. And the APH program has a wonderful series of videos of what I call the Carlo and Cecilia adventures. And what do Carlo and Cecilia think? Because Carlo is a police dispatcher. Cecilia had been a paramedic before she lost her vision, and is still in that field. And so I had these two guys out to 3 different situations, and they had to look at the situation, and then we went through our little checklist of risk factors and decided how likely was it that if they crossed in that situation, they'd be seriously injured or killed, and then decide if it was acceptable risk and look at alternatives. So I had that program. I wanted them to see those 3 videos, and also a checklist. I went over the checklist with them of the factors that you look at to analyze intersections, analyze the risk of these cross situations. And then I had the video of Jeremy Street. And again, it was not to have him analyze the risk of crossing at that street, but to give him practice in a practical situation. So let's see if I can. So here I'm not going to show you the video of Cecilia and Carla, but there they are on the screen, and you can see that Jeremy is watching the video there. I've got my little checklist on the computer here ready to fill it in. And then he watched a video of his own street for about 3 minutes, and then we went through the checklist together to analyze the risk of that situation.
So given that whole picture, what do you think are the likelihood that they're going to stop for you?
I'm sorry, this is just a segment of it.
There's a high likelihood.
High likelihood that they'll stop.
We're talking about discussing the likelihood that the driver, we've already gone through how likely is it you're going to be surprised by a vehicle that you didn't realize was coming. So we did that. Now we're talking, if that happens, what is the likelihood it's going to stop for you? And so we're going through the checklist on the items to figure out how likely is it they're going to go ahead and hit them. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Okay.
So given that whole picture, what do you think are the likelihood that they're going to stop for you? Or
there's a high likelihood.
High likelihood that they'll stop for you. Okay. So the likelihood of being hit is low if you are surprised, which is likely. All right. If in the highly likelihood that you are surprised, you think it's quiet, you think it's clear, and here comes a car, the chance that driver is going to hit you is low. But if that happens, let's see, I would guess that they're going about 35
to 40, typically.
I would be interested, when that come out that way, I'm going to actually see, because I've always been surprised they look a lot faster than they actually are. But let's say if it's 35 to 40, you said?
Yeah.
35 to 40.
And my wife is one of them.
All right, then the chance of you being seriously injured or killed is about half, about 55%. Yeah. So let me ask you then, how comfortable are you with the risk, given that it's highly likely that when it's quiet, there's a car coming that's going to surprise you? If you are surprised, they're likely to stop for you. And but if they don't stop for you, it's about a, what did I say, 55% chance you're going to be seriously injured. What do you feel about accepting that risk of crossing there?
I am cautiously comfortable with that risk.
You're accepting the risk. All right. Accept cautiously. Interesting. Tell me more about cautiously accepting the risk. How do you cautiously accept the risk? Yeah, I was wondering what you meant by cautiously accept the risk. I'm wondering what that means.
I'm going to be more careful. I'm going to spend more time making sure that I have evaluated the variables, gotten as confident a picture of the risk as I can and what the real situation is before I step out into the crosswalk.
Yeah. Because it may vary. You know, at nighttime you're not going to be so visible. So I always like to go the next step and say, what if you were not willing to accept that risk? What kind of alternatives might you use?
In this case,
yeah.
The alternatives that I have are the only real alternative that I have. No, that's not true. There's several alternatives. There's a bus that picks up on this side of the street, right behind where I was.
Yeah.
That circles around and comes back to the other side of the street.
Cool. So you wouldn't have to
take the bus to get across the road.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we went through everything on my little list, and so we still remotely, we'd like to understand what quiet means and recognize the effect of masking sounds, like, and then being able to listen to approaching vehicles. And in person, I want to have him apply all those skills to actual streets, assess real situations. I want to also evaluate and maximize his use of vision, determine which situations would be better for using his vision or his hearing, implement alternatives when it's too risky to cross, and then have him learn to, I don't know if he can see well enough to tell the width of the streets, but if not, be able to tell that by listening. And I think, Jeremy, let me stop sharing and turn it over to you for your thoughts.
Thank you, Donna. Can you guys hear me okay? I changed headsets.
You're still pretty soft.
How about now?
A little better.
A little better?
Not much.
Okay. Not much. How is that? Any better here?
You just sound a little muted, Jeremy. Sorry about that. I think
No,
the other
I'm
headset was better with the angle that you were using it.
Okay. That is nature of doing this, I guess.
What's nice is that we
let
do
me
have
speak
captioning.
up then.
That's
Oh,
perfect.
there we go.
That's
Let me
perfect.
speak up louder then. Okay.
There
so,
you go.
I want to talk to a couple things. Number one, from what I got out of this, all of my desired goals were hit. Donna helped me identify blind areas that I was not aware of. I do, historically, I rely more heavily on my vision than I realized, and I've started to make a shift to start with using my ears and then verifying with my eyes once I'm confident that my ears are giving me the full picture, and then using my vision just to verify that there's the probability of surprise has dropped down. But there were just going through the checklist of evaluating the risk at any particular intersection. I mean, I do this all the time. Every time I cross, whether it's an entrance to a McDonald's on the drag or any street, I'm doing a internal and oftentimes unconscious evaluation. One of the things that Donna did that immediately out of the box applicable is that application, that paradigm now has very specific criteria. Detection to arrival time, understanding how blind victims crossing the street. Those are things that I intuitively have done, but I couldn't have described it, and because I couldn't have described it, I really couldn't improve on it. From the very first, that's improving. Secondly, improving my ability to safely cross the street. As we were going through calibrating my internal clock, my internal rhythm, I was off. And I'm a musician. I play both bass and drums, where rhythm is key. So I'm pretty confident in my ability to judge timing and to realize where I was underestimating or overestimating, and be able to recalibrate that in real time was extremely useful. And then lastly, increasing my confidence. Already this has, I'm a big guy. I'm about 260 pounds. I know that most cars are going to see me. I know that most cars aren't going to want to have me across their hood. That said, I don't want to take out the life insurance policy and give it to my wife. So I still do things pretty cautiously, but it's kind of a cautious confidence that has been made both wiser and more confident. Wiser in that I can better evaluate what's actually in front of me, and more confident that I'm getting that evaluation right. So whether I'm by myself or whether it's with my 4- and 5-year-old son and daughter crossing a street, if I'm taking both my life and their lives into my hands, I do feel already more able to do that safely. From a technical point of view, using TeamViewer was pretty remarkable. It really was like working with Donna in the same room. The technology challenges that were there with the latency time of about a second, like Donna said, I was listening to her computer come through my computer over TeamViewer. So I had that audio with a little bit of latency. I had the audio coming through the FaceTime that Donna and I were doing. I was able to hear the audio coming out of her computer. It was then coming through FaceTime and hitting my ears at a slightly faster pace than the audio coming through my headphones for TeamViewer. So there was a double latency that we were working with. We figured out to mute the phones so that I was only getting one audio signal. And all of this in the midst of probably the least amount of bandwidth that any telecommunications company have ever experienced due to the uptick in web conferencing and internet use in the time of the coronavirus crisis. That leads me to say TeamViewer is a really good option. If it can handle the stress of working in the first week of April and do it in a way that not only was acceptable, but made me feel very comfortable, second only to, it was almost as if Dona was in just another room, not several miles away over several miles of internet connectivity. The realism of the experience was, I'm not quite sure how to describe it. I was going to say it was there. Looking at my intersection, being able to picture on the screen a crossing that I've done hundreds of times, and then being able to get into that headspace to make that crossing, to feel what it's like here, and to get this in a scenario that as closely as possible mimics real life, but at the same time I'm on the second floor of my home. There are going to be no cars that put me at risk at this point. And this is not only is it accessible, it's really, really comfortable.
Thank you.
Anything else I wanted to hit?
This is Leanne. I think this is a good place for us to actually pause and allow people to actually get their break, because we will be back on in a morning. So this next section is really questions and answers for Donna, Stephanie, Laura, Jeremy. We had a bunch come into our chat, and so I wanted to see if we could grab some of those and actually be able to answer the ones that had come into the chat room. And you were so patient in waiting. So I want to go and really think about the session that we had most recently talked about, which was Jeremy's session. We had quite a few questions, and Donna, if you believe that the question is something that really should be more answered by Jeremy, if you will point that to him, I think that would be helpful. But the question is, assessing the risk for oneself and determining that level of uncertainty or competence is a difficult concept to document, as it's extremely subjective. Documentation maybe should focus on something more concrete. Is there awareness? What can be measured by the scenarios? What are your thoughts?
Could you, so what was the concern about the situation of uncertainty? What?
So assessing the risk of oneself to determine that level of uncertainty, uncertainty.
Okay, let me clarify then. So a situation of uncertainty is when you're not sure it's clear to cross. That's all. You just don't have enough warning. Something could be coming that you didn't know that could reach you. So you're uncertain that it's clear to cross. That's it. Oh, Jeremy, I'm glad to see you here. And but assessing whether, so then once you find yourself in a situation of uncertainty, which again means nothing more than you don't know if it's clear or not. So then you assess, well, what would happen if I crossed? Well, there might be a car coming that I didn't know was there. If you look at the Cecilia and Carlo adventures, you'll see downtown Annapolis, and you couldn't hear the cars even as they were passing. They were going very slowly. It was 4 lanes, and almost every lane was filled. So the chance of when it's quiet, sometimes Carlo thought it was quiet, and there was a car right in front of him. So the chance that you're going to be surprised by a car is 100%. You think it's quiet, there's a car there. So then you look at, all right, if I am surprised by a car, if there is a car there that I didn't expect, what's the likelihood it's going to hit me? And the checklist has a number of things that research has shown affect how likely the drivers are going to hit you. Research such as faster cars, drivers who happen to be in a position where they're going fast are less likely to stop than drivers who happen to be in a situation where they're going more slowly. And we did research where Gene Borkman would walk out into the path of, I forget, like dozens of cars to see what would happen when he had a cane and when he didn't. And 40% of them stopped when he didn't have a cane. 90% of them stopped when he had a cane. So research has shown that there are some things that make it more or less likely that drivers are going to yield. And so you look at, so Jeremy and I went through that checklist and found out that actually in that situation, I mean, when I was videotaping it in those 3 minutes, 3 cars stopped for me and I didn't even look like I wanted to cross. So the chances that if he was surprised, there would be a car that the car would hit him was low. But then we looked at the third factor, which is if that happens, if you are surprised by a car and it does hit you, what's the likelihood you're going to be seriously injured? And there's a nice chart that I got from the Federal Highway Administration that shows at different speeds what's the likelihood. And at that speed, it was 55% chance that he's going to be seriously injured. So you put that all together, and then you look at, and this is the one there's a definition that's used in industry for safe. And it's so concrete and so functional that there's no question as to whether it's safe or not. And that is if the risk is acceptable. So as Jeremy said, it's one thing to kind of intuitively, I don't know, it seemed like blah, blah, blah. But if you look at all the features in it and how likely is this going to happen? And how likely is that going to happen? And if that happens, how likely is that going to happen? Put it all together and then look at, is that risk acceptable? And it may be acceptable to the instructor, but not to the student. Or it may be acceptable to the student, but not the instructor, et cetera. And in Carlo and Cecilia's adventures, they both agreed on 2 situations. And in the third, the risk was acceptable to Cecilia, but not to Carlo. So whether that risk is acceptable or not is a pretty concrete thing. It is or it isn't. But you have to make sure that they understand what the risks are. And then, is that acceptable to you? And if not, then you look at alternatives. All right, it's not acceptable. So what could you do? And Jeremy came up with a great solution of, well, don't cross there. I catch the bus on my side, ride it to the end, and there I am when it comes to pick me up, I'm already on it. Does that answer that question?
I hope so. Another one is, we know that you just started working with Jeremy. What was your follow-up so far? Have you tried crossing?
This is the follow-up. Hi, Jeremy. You enjoying your lesson? By the way, I want to thank you so much. It was so helpful to hear your insights on that, and the fact, wow, that it seemed real to you, and yet you felt safe. And boy, after Stephanie, that was a powerful story. Thank you so much. That really brought home, the kind of things that people have to deal with. That was so beautiful and moving. So so there has been no follow-up. His last lesson on the risk assessment was yesterday. So.
Okay. Some people were really thinking about, he's traveling alone, and that was your practice, traveling with young children, the different scenarios that might occur for an adult who's traveling.
Jeremy, do you want to take that? I'm not sure what the question is.
Would your crossing time change?
Some of the questions had to do with, this is Amy speaking, by the way. Some of the questions had to do with, Jeremy, if you were traveling with your own children. I actually love that. That was a question from Christy, who said, obviously you introduced yourself, a father of 4, with young ones crossing the street, and how you might factor that into your crossing time. And thinking about your desires, and your goal for instruction was to be more out with your family and to be taking your children quite naturally into the community when possible.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Perfect. So there are 2 really major impacts. One is my ability to focus is cut dramatically. Because I'm concerned primarily with the safety of my kids, most of my attention is on my children, and whatever is being left over after I know that they're safe is being used to cross the street. So That means that I'm going to be taking more time at the crossing. It's going to take more time to cross the street, and that's the second impact is I've got a 4-year-old. She walks everywhere we walk. She'll ask me to carry her, but my practice from my first kid to my fourth has been, if we're out walking, you're walking unless I am convinced you're actually too tired to walk, in which case I'll throw you up on my very large shoulders. But my kids have all done really, really well. However, teaching my kids how to cross an intersection, across a street, is an ongoing process where they're each at different levels. And I've taught certain fundamentals, and I have to go back and reinforce those fundamentals. But there's always the possibility that a hat's going to blow off, or that a stuffy is going to be dropped in the middle of the street, or that a child's simply going to get distracted and start either running across the street or straggling behind. In either case, we become stretched out in a way that is very uncomfortable for me and very unsafe. So that means I'm going to wait as long as possible before we actually step out. However, I want to say this because my oldest son is in the room behind me right now. He has become a very expert guide at all of my kids know how to read the crosswalk signs. They all know how to press the buttons, and they will all take turns being kind of on point, going up to the intersection, determine it's clear, and knowing that even after they've determined that it's clear to cross and that we have the signal with us, they don't go anywhere until. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And one of the things I do like is being with a group of people where I don't have to pay nearly as much attention, especially if they're people that I'm actually with, not just crossing the street at the same time. But there are a lot of different factors that all come into play. And yeah, it's juggling a lot. The more responsibilities I have, souls crossing the street with me, the more difficult it gets.
Thank you so much. This is Amy. And since you were in the hot seat, so to speak, and taking some questions, another question came in about maybe being able to, one, practice additional time with your children, maybe just with one child. Another question was thinking back to when you maybe were 18 years old or a younger self. One of the concerns that orientation and mobility specialists and others have is that sometimes younger people typically take risks or that have less experience and maybe have a little less fear because they've had less time to be challenged in life, perhaps. So could you reflect a little bit on using this program and coming up with when are situations of confidence, situations of uncertainty, and how those play a role?
Yeah, let me take the second one first. Again, I'm going to describe myself as a progressive, which means I have not gotten onto these either skills or training as quickly as in retrospect I would have liked to. Even as recently as a year or 18 months ago, I was taking risks, excuse me, I was taking risks that I would not consider acceptable now. And that's just based on experience. So I'll be 40 this year. Some of that vim and vigor and arrogance takes a long time to get out, but I'm not really sure how to give that gift to someone else other than to be with them and to reflect back with real life stories and say, this, I can put myself in your position because I was in your position. These are the things that I consider now. This is how my perspective has changed and why. And this is how now I evaluate this situation. This is how I make my decision process, and trying to walk that journey with somebody who's younger, first putting yourself into their shoes and then asking them to try to step into your shoes to walk alongside to see that. With specifically sort of pivoting to use what I've learned so far with my kids, kind of taking a precursor step to that. One of the things that I've done from the time that they were quite young is taking them on both group walks and individual walks as often as possible. And each of those is a training opportunity that specifically we've talked about how to walk on the sidewalk safely. We've talked about how to approach an intersection safely, how to cross an intersection safely. And the best time to do that is when I'm one-on-one with them. A group setting really is an opportunity for me to lean more heavily on one or two of the kids who have demonstrated the competency in particular skill levels. And you know, I've learned to be able to trust their assessment and know that when they say there are no cars coming, they've actually taken the time to look and they know what a car coming actually means. But even moving forward, this now gives me more tools to work with them, to have them develop the skills for evaluating crossing the same way, and not because two of my children have the same congenital condition I have. They've already had their lenses removed. They're in glasses. We're hoping that their sight does not deteriorate, but it's a very real possibility. And it's one of the things that I can pass on to them now is giving them the skills and the training opportunities to develop now when they don't need it, so that when they get to a time where, God forbid, they may need it, it's not as difficult a transition. I could say more, but I'll stop for the sake of time at this point.
So Jeremy, this is Amy. We're going to take a couple more questions for you and then hopefully open it up to some of the other questions that have come in more from an orientation and mobility perspective. One, Shelby says she has a link for a resource for you, perhaps because of your leadership too in parenting, to join a group in Virginia called Parenting Blind, and we'll send you that link after the presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. A practical question for you. Did you use a screen reader while you were using TeamViewer with Dona?
Kind of a two-part answer there. Yes and no. I used a screen reader while I was getting it set up and installed. I had used TeamViewer several years previously and hadn't used it in a while. Once I got it set up, though, Dona's computer and the program itself did everything that I needed to. From that point on, Dona, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the program could be controlled completely by either my keyboard using TeamViewer or by her computer. So at that point, the audio prompts, the recording in the modules were doing all the reading, lifting for me, and all I was doing was listening and or watching and responding through the keyboard.
Right. This is Dona. Yes, I was able to keep control of my computer as well as you. Either one of us could have moved the mouse and pushed the buttons. And sometimes I did that to get to the next one rather than having you go, push the button and whatever. And yeah, the program, the APH program reads in a beautiful voice, a professional reader. So there was no need for you to use the JAWS to read the material.
Just getting off of mute. This is Amy. Questions about Dona, shifting to if Jeremy or someone else were completely blind, what is the viability of using this product remotely? If you could just comment on some of the thinking that may be involved in that.
I would like Jeremy's input, but the APH program is intended to be used by blind people who are not using their vision to press the keyboard, press the keys and whatnot. They may take some practice to press the keys if they're not familiar with the keyboard. But other than that, Jeremy, did you find that your vision was required for some of the tasks?
Let me give a caveat answer here. One, my vision was required for the tasks, downloading TeamViewer, and this was a situation that was developing as Dona and I were working together and finding a solution. So from that vantage point, the fact that I had the vision and I knew what I was looking for and I was able to follow along certainly did make it easier for me to get started in TeamViewer and then walk with Dona through getting it set up and using it. TeamViewer itself as a program, I have not evaluated to see how it holds up to accessibility from an accessibility technology point of view. I use the Mac hardware has built in. They speak the text that the mouse is hovering over. I use that pretty regularly. So knowing what I was about to click on and finding the information I needed was, from that vantage point, very simple. That said, I use a computer probably for 90% of my work. I'm very comfortable on a computer. I have both a mother and an adopted sister who are completely blind. My mom doesn't use a computer at all. My sister's pretty comfortable and would use JAWS. I'm confident my sister would be able to use JAWS to navigate to download, install, and launch TeamViewer, and then from a engaging with TeamViewer, the student would be the one who has to initiate the contact to the instructor, because the student is actually going to take control of the teacher's, the instructor's computer. I'm confident that my sister would be able to do that using JAWS as well, and once in, the keyboard interface would not be a problem at all.
This is Donna. Yeah, and that was one of my criteria, was trying to find a system where the student wouldn't have to be responsible. And thank goodness the student here actually came up with a solution and figured it out. But once it's installed, now they might need some help to install if they're not computer savvy and whatnot. I need Jeremy's help to install it, let me put it that way. And once it's installed, the instructor still has control of the computer and can push all the buttons and do everything. So it would be a matter of getting the student, all that they really need to do is push the space bar, to do what the APH program tells them to do. And if they can just do that, they shouldn't have to do anything else once it's installed. But installing it may be a problem that would make this unusable for some people if they don't have somebody to help them install it.
I just want to compliment Jeremy again. This is Amy on the timing of this. It does seem providential, Donna, that Jeremy came to you for instruction during this pandemic, and as we were actually talking about this webinar. So all of these pieces coming together, and Jeremy, your willingness to provide support to Donna for using TeamViewer. I think it just shows the spirit of collaboration. And thank you so much for sharing about your family experiences, your personal journey, Jeremy, your risk assessment, even 18 months ago. I think that was extremely powerful and self-effacing, it's just been amazing to have you as a part of the webinar today. I do want to turn it now to Donna. There have been several questions, Donna, both when you were instructing Jeremy, when you were instructing us, when we were going through the simulations with you, about not counting in your head. And you said it numerous times that you're not going to learn anything. And so there have been numerous comments about why would you
question. Good.
And then the cane that some people reflected on. There have been such a plethora of questions that I'm trying to sort of blend many of them together for you, that some people use their cane and actually as the cane as a counting tool. So could you speak to that? And in one more instance of veering, several people had questions and concerns about, the veering, it happens. And so that also influences your crossing time. Can you speak to those issues?
Oh, these are great questions, and I'm glad you lumped them together. With the crossing time, that's why you do several crossings. And if they're consistent, it's fine. But if there's a difference, you always take the longer one. So if there's a veering or something like that, then you take the longest one, and you can't say, well, we'll just average them out, because in one particular case, you needed that time. So that's the time that you need. So that's your crossing time. So it would include any little thing. As I said, most people slow down as they reach the other side. They don't want to trip over the curb. So that's included in there. And as far as counting and whatnot, many of us realize, when we're working on developing kind of a time distance when people are walking, we said, don't count your footsteps. If you count your footsteps, you're not learning anything. You're not developing that intuitive kind of like a gestalt kinesthetic sense of distance and time and whatever. So it's the same thing here. If you achieve the tasks, if you figure out when you would have reached the other side by counting, you've learned to count. You haven't learned to have that intuitive sense. you know, I wish I had, sometimes I drive along this kind of a harrowing, not harrowing, it's a 2-lane street with a lot of busy, heavy traffic. Every once in a while, I see one of the people crossing the street, and I know they're not, let's see, 1001, 1002. They're just like Jeremy said, they have that gut. It just comes as a gut, and it's never going to come as a gut if you're relying on counting. It has to be just an intuitive sense. Does that answer that?
This is Amy. I certainly think it does. And I think Jeremy also reflected on that when he was talking about headspace.
Exactly.
That this is about a headspace, putting yourself in that mental space. And you know, that actually reminds me of some things that were in the old Hill and Ponder book, which many of us studied under as orientation and mobility specialists. That, you know, Hill was famous, Dr. Hill was famous for talking about just that mental mapping, and so this program, I think, helps develop that in terms of confidence and competence.
Yeah.
So Donna, some other questions that came, one was from Kevin Hollinger, and I really appreciated Kevin's multiple comments, very thoughtful questions. One, that this really isn't truly remote instruction, fully remote, because he mentioned that you were incidentally able to meet Jeremy and get the timing yourself. And my response to him was, I think of this example that you all provided today as hybrid. It truly is like a hybrid.
It turned out to be hybrid only because I lost my $400 key on the corner that you were looking at today, and I so hope to find it. But I would not have been there if I hadn't had to stay. And the plan was for him to get the timing himself. You know, his wife come and time it, or him use a stopwatch or time it. So that would have made it remote. But yeah, I was able to meet him and take a picture of him before with a mask on. I was asking him about his vision, and he said, "Do you have a mask on?" Yes, I do. And so, so it could have been remote. It could have been completely remote with me never having met him or been in his community, by having him get the timing. All I needed from him was the timing of the crossing.
Another question from Kevin earlier was about doing this in a parking lot, maybe to, you know, as you situationally build the confidence in the program, like working with Stephanie's student as an example, of course, working on just the computer, just the trust building, the relationship building, the confidence, and then maybe moving into maybe an indoor environment and doing a crossing, then moving to a parking lot. Can you?
Great ideas. No, I can't. Those sound like great ideas. I've never had to do that. You know, you introduce people slowly. I have had a woman who was so anxious. We were standing at the street and discussing, you know, concepts of a traffic signal. And she said, "I can't handle it." So we ended up having to go to her kitchen so she could hold her dog while I talked to her about the traffic signal. So, you know, that I've had that, but I've not really had to work people up to getting up to a street. And but that sounds like a good idea, Kevin. If you're too afraid to walk into a street, how about crossing the parking lot? So, or a little lane or something, or your driveway.
Of course, here's the one for the money, guys. I'm going to pitch you the harder questions now from our intrepid attendees from all over the world. Application. That really, this is really nice to build confidence. It's really nice to develop these skills, but how do we now take it to application and assure ourselves? And then the other question to weave into this response, and Donna, this is truly one for you, because I think it's about our profession, Stephanie as well. Liability, the issues of remote instruction and liability. If we could have a little bit of conversation about that.
Yeah. First of all, liability wise, if you're doing, what do you call it, best practice, and that's interesting because we don't have best practice yet for this, do we? But so liability aside, whether you're doing it remotely or with the program sitting with the person at the computer, you're not done until you take this out on the road and apply it. This program remote or in person, is only to help develop those skills. But you're not done until they apply those skills to multiple situations. And, you know, you're satisfied with their progress the way you have been for anything else. It's just that the skills that they are applying were learned in a very efficient manner. Yeah, somehow I lost you. Anyway, am I still on?
Are. And what Laura has done is Laura is sharing her
Thank you, Laura.
chapter 6 to supplement what you're saying. So she's showing, let's take this show on the road, applying and developing in real life settings. So either Laura or Donna, but please continue, Donna.
Okay, and it says, let's take the show on the road, applying and developing skills. Congratulations. This chapter is just for you, the instructor. And if you've gotten this far, your students have already learned a lot. Using simulations and text, you've taught them to understand what situations of uncertainty are, be able to compare their crossing time, observe a series of approaching vehicles and judge if it's a situation of uncertainty, analyze the risks, decide if the risks are acceptable, consider alternatives. And so Laura, if you could move that forward. Students who work through chapter 3 also learned what quiet means. They practice listening for vehicles and perhaps improve their ability to hear the vehicles. Now, it's time to bring your students to the finish line. They need to be able to apply all the skills that they learned in simulation to the real world and use them at crossings that are wider than the 2-lane straights that were simulated. They also have a few skills that they need to develop, such as those who rely on hearing need to be able to figure out how wide the street is by listening. Those who have functional vision need to know how to use that vision efficiently. And if students have both vision and hearing, they need to learn how to determine when to use which. This chapter will provide you, the instructor, with some suggestions for applying the skills that your students have learned in simulation and for teaching them the remaining skills that they need and which could not be learned effectively through a simulation. So that's, you know, that's an important, I'm glad you brought, whoever asked that, Kevin or somebody, that's huge. You're not done teaching when they're done getting these skills. This is just a really efficient way for them to get a particular set of skills, and then you take them on the road and apply what they learned. And maybe you find that they didn't really learn it, or maybe, you know, it works out great. Whatever it is, you're gonna do as you always do and teach them in real life.
And this is Amy. I know we're almost at time, so I'm going to put a link in the chat pod too. Donna and I had the pleasure of working. First of all, Donna is such a generous person. I do just want to thank her again for this webinar and for creating this product with APH. I want to thank APH for their generosity in this webinar, hosting it for free. Yeah. Even though it's a free webinar, it is not really free in terms of people's time or the captioning that it takes, as you know, a lot to put these things on. What I'm sharing on my screen is a link to a Google site that is open right now. And Donna collaborated with many colleagues at Portland State, some of whom are on the phone today. Chiefly Mary Tellefson, who is a comms out of Wisconsin and an adjunct faculty member in our program, very trusted partner. This module is something that Portland State put together with support of colleagues like Donna, like Mary, like Nick Casillas, who is at Cal State LA, who is on the call today. We put this module together before COVID-19. Because distance consultation is needed. It's a part of equity, okay? For people who live in rural and remote communities, or people who live in rural Alaska or in the Pacific Rim who do not have regular access to orientation mobility instruction. So I am putting this link in here that we invite you. As Donna said, we don't have enough research on this practice. We have synthesized what research we can. Donna referenced Dr. Eugene Borkwin, who was also on the call today, who has contributed to our body of knowledge, but we are researching this at Portland State. And Mary Tellefson helped put together this module with partners, with case studies for early intervention, for considerations for adults, and we are field testing this. The other thing I will just say in closing is that we need your feedback. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to put this in the chat to everybody. Sorry that I have to be like romper room and say everything that I'm going to do aloud, but it actually helps me. As I do that, are there any closing remarks that need to be made as we have 1 minute left?
I need to launch a poll because we need to know or have an idea of how many people might actually be ordering this APH with the delays that we do have with COVID-19 and all businesses have. We want to make sure that we're able to be responsive to those people who might be interested in ordering, so we can make sure we have enough in stock for those that are looking for it. So we ask if you'll use the poll. If for some reason you're one of those individuals that is struggling with the poll and you want to just send me an email, you can, but that gives us an idea of how much it is. The cost is $62 on the APH website. If you already ordered the program, that's not an option. I didn't know people would actually go forward and order it during the presentation, so you guys got me on that one. So that is one of those pieces, and I will type the closing code in the chat, but I'm going to let anyone else who has a last minute remark to be able to put that up.
Just questions to you, Leanne, about sending their request in for ACVRAP and the closing code.
Okay, then I am going to stop the recording and do that in a second. I wanted to at least say thank you to everyone who has participated. Laura, Donna, Stephanie, Amy, Jeremy, thank you so much for participating, and we will work very hard to get this recording up quickly.
I just want